made up nonsense. And renaming, which he does not have the power to do, Lake Ontario is a perfect example of how Trump doesn't have the world vision or the depth of knowledge to be the president of the United States. He's far more interested in putting up gold-painted plastic sconces in the Oval Office, tearing buildings down, building monuments to himself. And those of us who live up here on the edge of Lake Ontario find this at most amusing.
President Donald Trump has threatened to rename Lake Ontario as Lake America, to go from the sublime to the ridiculous. It is amid his escalating tariff war with Canada, and Lake Ontario is one of the 5 Great Lakes and straddles the border between the US and Canada. Trump has previously taken an interest in renaming prominent geographical features, and last year he rebranded the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America and restored Alaska's Denali, a name derived from the indigenous language, to its former name, Mount McKinley. So what is the psychology behind this latest move and all this renaming? Let's speak to David Cay Johnston, author of the pretty critical Making of Donald Trump. He lives only a few miles from the lake, and I think it's fair to say, David Johnston, that you take a pretty dim view of the behaviour of the US president.
Oh, absolutely. He is utterly unqualified. He sold people in America on the belief that he's this brilliant businessman negotiator. And I've shown from his own documents over the last 38 years that that's all just made up nonsense. And renaming, which he does not have the power to do, Lake Ontario is a perfect example of how Trump doesn't have the world vision or the depth of knowledge to be the president of the United States. He's far more interested in putting up gold-painted plastic sconces in the Oval Office, tearing buildings down, building monuments to himself. And those of us who live up here on the edge of Lake Ontario find this at most amusing.
Well, I was surprised he didn't suggest calling it Lake Trump rather than Lake America. But you say he doesn't have the right. Just explain that to us. So who is in charge of naming this lake?
Well, there are both national to the U.S. and international bodies whose job is to assign proper names. In Western New York, where I live, for example, we have towns from the ancient world: Egypt, Macedon, Athens, and those were because the state of New York in the early 1800s assigned a clerk who had been a classics major at Harvard to name these little unnamed villages and wide spots in the road, the dirt road. And so he gave them all these names from the ancient world. And nobody's paying attention to this. You know, Trump banned the Associated Press, the big global nonprofit news agency, from the White House because they wouldn't call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And in court, he lost on that. He had to restore the AP's access to the White House. But all of this is about a man who is in miles over his head, trying somehow to play being president. And he's not someone of big ideas. I mean, whatever you think of Richard Nixon or Barack Obama, they both had very highly educated, rigorous minds, and they thought big thoughts about global affairs. Donald worries about the drapes in his ballroom.
So do you think, as a more political thing, this is being used to intimidate Canada, or is it actually more frivolous than that, that it's really just about his liking to change natural names, buildings and other things in a way that sort of leaves him having a legacy? Or is there something, it's just more part of this war with the Canadian government over the tariff rate?
Well, Donald, who I've covered for 38 years and written 3 books about, 3.5 actually, he has always held this belief that he is special, that he has himself said no one should be president of the United States except him, and he runs the whole world. When I first reported that, I think 15 years ago, I was mocked by some fellow journalists and opinion writers, and then Donald came out about a year ago, or 2 years ago, I guess now, and said, I run the whole world. If he wasn't president, I would tell you he has delusions of grandeur. And all of this is, I'm special, you will do what I say. And in the matter with Canada, he's picking a fight for no reason except to distract people from his failings.
And let's just understand a little bit about this move. It's this move. First of all, tell me what the locals think about it. That means those people who live near you.
Right. Well, the elected executive of Monroe County, where I live, I thought handled it very well today on the front page of the local paper. He said there are more important things the president of the United States should be dealing with, like inflation and job growth and ending the unconstitutional war in Iran. And I think that's exactly right. Donald is focused on the things that he knows. And those have to do with buildings and putting his name on things. They don't have to do with the real issues affecting Americans. And at the same time, he has a real serious need internally to establish that he is all powerful. Hence his fight with Canada, which the Canadians, by the way, are having great fun with. They're producing various videos mocking him, showing moose and bears and things, getting ready for a Canadian bacon war between the U.S. and Canada.
Well, that was David Cay Johnston, the author of The Making of Donald Trump. And as you can tell from that item, he's not too impressed by the latest idea of naming Lake Ontario Lake America. Coming up,